the Consol number 9 mine at Farmington, West Virginia on November the 20th, 1968. I have requested the author to discuss with you some of the highlights of his book, They Died in the Darkness, and to share with all of us the knowledge he has acquired on this subject through his years of extensive research. It is indeed with pleasure I introduce to you a gentleman who knows his subject matter extremely well, Mr. Lacy A. Dillon.
Ladies, gentlemen, I'm, in a sense of the word, glad to be here. It's a little work, it's a little of this and a little of that. But, on the other hand, maybe what I would say to you, or tell you, since you plan to be in the upper facets of coal mining, would prevent something someday that would save the lives of men. And that should be worthwhile. In fact, that's why this whole institute is here, is it not? Yes. Now, to begin this, as he complimented me on it, I did the research on the basis not to write just a dry dissertation on coal mining. If you want that, you can get the Federal Bureau and read their statements, or you could read some of them put out by the State Department of Mines. They're rather scarce. I will have to say, before I get into the real nitty-gritty of this, it's very difficult to get any information from the West Virginia State Mine Department. I went first to Mr. Ashcraft, who was at the head of the mine department at that time, asked him for information. So I said, Mr. Dillon, we don't have any information here. We don't have any whatever. I said, where do you file it, don't you? No. He said, we turn it over to the Department of Archives, their library, and that's as far as he went. I found out that quite a bit of the material had gone to West Virginia University, and a bit of it was in the archives, and there's a bit of it I can't find yet. There is a considerable amount of the material on mine disasters from the State Department of Mines that I cannot find, although I've got trace on it and may come up with it. But the law does state that a report, accident report, must be made, does it not, Mr. Blanchard, for every fatal accident that occurred in the coal mining industry in the state of West Virginia. Now, at the beginning of the mining industry in West Virginia, the State Department of Mines did come out with a more detailed account of what happened, and that did help. And up around 1917, that was no longer available to me. I don't know where it is, but I can't find it. And the girls at the archives didn't find it. They search through things all the time. Now, down to the happenings in the mine explosions, Mr. Blankenship informed me that he would like for me to display to you orally and as picturesque as possible the statements on how terrific that a mine blast actually was and could be. Some of them are beyond your imagination. Now I'll go. The first real terrific one we had was at Newburgh, back in January 1884, 86. There was a little one in 84. And the state was somewhat surprised, shocked, chagrined that such a thing could happen. In other words, I believe that some man or else a newspaper reporter from the Prestonburg Journal came out and wrote an article stating the day the world came to an end at Newburgh. And to people in a small town like that, it did seem as if the world had come to an end when 37 men's lives were snuffed out just like that. And the town was so shocked. And of course the people, all the people that worked in the mine lived in the town of Newburgh. In those days, transportation wasn't what it is today. You didn't live, well, somewhere else. The furthest man would ride a mule or a horse into the time up somewhere, as they did back in those days. And the mine was only about hardly a half a mile back in underground. It was a shaft mine. And it was owned by interests outside of the state of West Virginia. I made the statement in the book that seemed to be setting a pattern that all mines in West Virginia would be owned by somebody other than West Virginians. This one was owned by a Baltimore firm. And there was nothing blamed the company for the explosion so much as maybe the lack of experience. But anyway, the mine went off and it killed all 37 in the mine, and some of them were just mere boys. They were killed, and it was several days before they were able to bring the bodies out. And some of the information I got, by the way, there was good information in Newburgh, even if it went back to 1884, that the bodies brought out made the town have a terrible odor. The bodies had putrefied, and when they would bring them up the street in wagons, taking them to their houses, and that brought in another story. A lot of the men were not embalmed. They were brought to the houses and worked on as well as possible, used some kind of astringent, carbolic acid or something to keep down the smell. And then they were carted off to the cemetery. And today those bodies lie behind the Newburgh High School. So much for Newburgh. Now let's come to 1900, 1884, 1900. The next big one went off over Red Ash, just below Thurman, 2 miles below Thurman, on this side of the river. Let me tell you a little story happened. I went over there to go down to see the old mine. It's no longer in existence, of course, and I like to find out what that looks like now. And this is a little humorous side of it. Went to the postmaster over in Thurman. Nice gentleman, man with considerable knowledge of things. And I said, well, you can't drive a car down there, of course. No. I said, I can walk down. He said, about 2 miles. And it was in the springtime, running towards summer. And he said, mister, don't walk down there. And I said, why? He said, man, I'm telling you, you'll get eat up by snakes. He said, it's a snake down through there. A copperhead or a rattler gets you. He said, don't do it. And I took him at his word. I didn't walk down there. And I had that to happen in another place, too, I was told. Not to go, that the snakes were so bad in the summertime. Wait until leaves were down and they were in hibernation and froze up and so on. And then the explosion, the first explosion there that happened in 1900, it was known as the Red Ash Mine only. It's on this side of the river, the mine is, too, also, into the mountains this way, facing the north side of the New River Gorge. And the mine the explosion was a matter of pure carelessness. The mine foreman didn't get in the mine and make a mine run on that Monday morning and did not detect the gas, and the mine went off, killed 47 souls. Terrible thing. We don't let such things as that happen nowadays. Mine, of course, as you know, has to be inspected before the miners enter. Now, I've got 2 or 3 cases of that happened. That happened in the explosion up the northern end of the state at just right thin letting slip a mine. Near Parsons, not too far from Elkins, a place called Thomas came to me. And on a Monday morning, the men went in the mine, and presumably the fan hadn't been run all weekend. Up she went. About 16 men died there. I had a story told me by a merchant there whose father was working there at the time and was not in the explosion. The one account says the superintendent, and the other account says the mine foreman rushed into the mine. It was a very low shaft, and there was a drift mouth at another point, but this was where they went down by a shaft into the working. He rushed down, went down right quickly into the mine to see if he could retrieve anyone or get anybody, and he picked up a man who had already died and ran with that man out to the mouth of the mine and was hoisted to the top in the hopes that he could save him, laid the body down, fell dead himself. I asked this old gentleman there who owned the store in Thomas what in the world made him do it. Why, he said, it was his guilt. He hadn't inspected the mine. He hadn't started the fan. He wanted to redeem himself. And he carried that man out in hopes that he could revive him. Fell dead. There were 2 dead men on the outside of the mine as a result of that. That was at Thomas now. Then going ahead, Rush Run Red Ash blew up again in 1905. 1905 had 2 explosions, and got the nickname of the Once Again Mine. Boy, a man wrote me a letter and told me, he said, you got that all wrong. Another man told me, he said, that's a nickname, the Once Again Mine. The mine blew up on Saturday evening. A woman came to me about a year ago and she said, did you know that if my grandfather hadn't gotten drunk, I wouldn't be here today? She said on that Saturday he was supposed to go to work in the Red Ash mine, said he got hilariously drunk. Said he got so drunk, his name is Tharosky, he was a Russian. Said he got so drunk that he just couldn't get to the mine. And the mine crew went in, I think only about 15 men went in, and the mine blew up. And he was, of course, not among the men that got killed. That mine blew up. It has a little peculiar feature to it I thought was a human interest story. Mr. Lang, who later became prominent in West Virginia mining circles, Mr. Lang had a big party at his house that night, or was planning to have a big party, and he had all the brass from the coal camps around, and one of them was from over at Sun. Most of I guess know where Sun is, over Fayette County. He rode a short dog train down to Thurman, and then another little train. I don't think there's any passenger train ran down to the mine. Anyway, he had a girlfriend named Phoebe, and she was his escort to the party. And back in those days, the superintendent would throw a big party for the higher-ups, you know, the uppity-ups. The coal miner didn't get near one. He did. He got a good booting coming around. He wasn't supposed to be in such society as the superintendent or those people. I guess most of you people knew that. I can remember when that was the case. Glen Rogers, where I grew up. Anyway, the men at the party decided they would go up and take a look around the mine offices and buildings that were nearer the mine entrance. It was a drip-out mine. This auditor from Sun stepped out of the building and was looking at the mouth of the mine when it blew. That mine blew out of there with a spurt of flame. First it was a blue-white flame. It blew all the way across the gorge and scorched the cliffs on the other side of the river, and one statement said that the woods were caught afire. I don't know that. I never got that as an actual true fact. But I would like to find an artist somewhere who could draw the picture of that blue, yellow flame that shot straight across that valley for 3/4 of a mile on a practically horizontal and spewed for some 30 seconds. Man, that gives you an idea what a little methane stirring up coal dust can do. This auditor was very much scared. They went back to the house. Now, there was a little something I always thought was peculiar. Some man got his son and a group of other fellows and went into the mine immediately to see if they could retrieve any or rescue any men, weren't killed. And never did I find any research that Mr. Lang supervised anything, nor a mine foreman even went in with them. Just some men did it on their own. And they searched in that mine wearing these, in those days, no electric lamps. They were wearing possibly these old lard oil lamps. And somewhere around 1 o'clock in the morning, that rescue crew blew that mine up again. And all of them died in there. That's presumably how it got its Once Again name. Then the fellow who was the auditor had been told, now you go down and stay with the women down at the party, and we'll do getting some ready to organize to go in the mine. And he wrote the statement that when that mine blew the second time, those women thought all their men were in the mine, and he said he had all this time in his life trying to settle down a bunch of hysterical women, and he scared to death himself when that jar went off and killed him. Now, that was the Rush Run Red Ash mine. The Rush Run mine had been opened up since the Red Ash mine, and they were joined together, and each one had an individual fan. And the fan from the Rush Run mine enabled them quite a bit to retrieve the bodies. Now the next explosion of any importance, which is not included in this book, was Berryburg, 1900, just a few months after, well, in fact, red ash Russian blew in January, and red ash blew in, Berryburg blew in October or November. Berryburg is the only instance of a mine blowing up in my research that possibly a man blew it up. A man got disgruntled at the mine foreman and decided he'd carry some powder in the mine and maybe do a lot of damage to the mine and get the mine foreman in trouble, and because he made a statement to another man, I don't want to hurt anybody. He set a fuse to the powder keg. Mine wasn't very far back into the hill, and ran to the outside. My gosh, he had all kinds of kegs of powder in there. Didn't have dynamite, just a black powder. And as he got about some 15 feet out of the mouth of the mine, she blew up, got him too. Got all the men inside the mine. A total of 15 men died in that. And the State Department of Mines came out with a statement. And the mine inspector who gave the report of how and why the mine blew labeled that man as being the culprit. I thought that was something unusual. Now, one other one blew up, and it's not in this book, that a man was accused of doing that. And I had a man to tell me. He knew darn well who the man was that did it. But I wouldn't dare publish it. I won't give his name out. Several instances I didn't name for 2 or 3 reasons. It'd be embarrassment, you know. Be an embarrassment to a family to think that one of their kin had done anything like that. And again, there may not be truth in some of the stories that were told. Now moving on from the early explosions, let's come to one that I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with. Though you speak term invasion, I don't refer to it anyway. Eccles blew on the 28th day of April at 2:30 in the afternoon in 1914. This is a story that an old miner told me many, many years ago. I was probably then about out of high school or starting college when he told me this. His name was Chris Brooks. I named him in this book. Fine gentleman. Chris Brooks said that he laid off from the Eccles mine in order to plow up his farm back on the mountain from Eccles coming toward Beckley. Had a couple of boys just big enough to help him do his farming. Said in the afternoon, pretty sunny day, he said he felt the earth jar and felt a rumble. Now this is a story he told me. He said, I said to one of my sons, boy, you listen. If that goes again, that's Eccles blowing. And he said, I waited a few seconds, and he said, then it really came. Oh, he said it came with a terrific jolt. And he said, I knew then that mine was blowing because I worked there, and he knew it was a hot mine. He said it wasn't very long, let a long black spiral of smoke rose to the heavens. I understand from other research that the people in Beckley could see that spiral of smoke, and some state that when the lights were broken in Beckley from the jar of that explosion. Statistics say that 183 men died there. Now, there were 2 levels of mining. One of them was in the Beckley seam. That was the number 5 seam. The Beckley seam, the number 5 mine over Eccles. And the other seam is the Sewell seam, and they call that the number 6. Men were working in the number 6, and about 9 men died in the number 6 level from Black Day. But in the other, all those men died instantly, presumably. Now, from that first blow, that was the gas explosion. It blew to the face. According to Mr. Brooks, it blew to the face, and then, you see, it picked the dust up, and then it returned, and it blew to the outside. That was a terrific explosion. It blew mules down to the bottom of the shaft, just blew them in stacks down there. In fact, 50-some mules were killed in that explosion. And the statistics say that actually 193 men died instead of the 183 that's officially accounted for. It blew some parts of those mules out of that vertical shaft, 500 and some feet to the outside. Planks. Some said it even blew steel car wheels out. One man told me, the old mine foreman there, that he knew a black man who was going toward the shaft when it blew, and he ran for his life. That stuff fell everywhere. I saw one picture, which I wasn't able to get to put in my book, of all the pile of debris and timber, boards, material that fell outside the shaft mouth. Here's one story I didn't tell in the other. There was a man in number 6 mine, now that's a level above, that became excited and wanted to get out, and there was another shaft up there that they wanted to get the men out, the other hole above, number 5 shaft, and he grabbed the cable, bucket cable, and climbed that cable, named McCluskey, I think, pretty close to pronouncing it, till he got to the outside of that shaft. That was, of course, the Sewell seam was only 200 feet from the surface, and they picked him off that. Now, a man told me this, that he was there with it when it happened. His hand, blood raw, he climbed it. And he left Eccles and got him a job at Leyland. 11 months after he died in the Leyland Explosion. That same man. That's the human interest stories. I picked up a lot of them for the book. But Eccles is on record as being one of the most terrific jolts. Now, the Leyland Explosion did not have that type of jar when it went off, but it blew terrifically to the outside. Now, Leyland, ladies, gentlemen, is just across the Dew River Gorge from Prince, going north there. They don't mine the same drift, but they mine the same seam and in the same area. It didn't hit all that mine. It was entirely a dust explosion, Leyland was. Mine research men that went in to find out why it blew, didn't tell why it blew, according to Mr. Dillon. He said that mine was so dusty that he had men to tell him that they could walk into the Leyland mine and the dust would boil up behind them. If they turned around and go back, they couldn't find their way. That when men went in, they went in shirt-tails fashion, one holding to the other one. That's how bad the dust was. And he said the morning he went to work, he went to work at 7 o'clock, went to work in the mine, was to go to work at 7 o'clock, they caught a motor going up in the main section when it didn't blow. And that he looked behind him and that dust boiled up from the track, so it was something else. Well, the mine foreman had stated the day before the explosion, if somebody doesn't do something, this mine is going to blow up. And it blew the next morning at 7:30. Now, Mr. Dillon told me, he was one of the survivors now, told me that what happened, the mining company decided how they're going to get rid of that dust. And they put an enormous fan at the face of the coal. Now, the mine went in like this straight, and one entry turned off to the left. They went into that left big entry, haulage way, main haulage way, put a fan at the face, big electric fan. Their idea was to blow that dust out of that mine with that enormous fan. Sounds feasible to you just hear it now, but it's against the law now, isn't it?
Really?
Huh? They won't allow a fan inside the mine now. It has to be to the outside and pull it out, doesn't it?
We can use auxiliary fans, but not main fans.
Main big
Not
fan,
fans
yeah.
that big, no.
Now, according to what Mr. Dillon's told me, they turned that fan on, no doubtedly. There was no survivors to tell. And it arced enough that it set that dust. Just as it started blowing and picking the dust up, it blew at 7:30. He presumed that the operator of the fan didn't start it until maybe a few minutes. He was getting ready and getting everything ready, and then by the time it picked up a momentum and it picked up the dust, and out came that explosion. Now, that explosion out of that left turn was a terrific something. It blew the concrete face or the stonework face of the mine away and blew those blocks across that valley, which was a kind of a level valley, blew it across there, and one of those blocks or two or something killed a black boy with a little cart and his dog going along after some hay. And he caught them out some 100 feet from the mouth of the mine. Just obliterated them. And it is said by some people that to this day, some of those beautiful blocks that were on the face, I'll say that mine has never been found. They blew them over in the next county, maybe. I don't know. That is something else to think about there. And that is one of the mines that had the most marvelous rescue. There were 47 men entombed in that mine, and had streamer headlines in the Beckley newspapers that all the men in the mine were dead, and ran over 200. Actually, the count was 112, and the statistical count is 112, and the other count is 119. If it is 119, it was presumably about the fourth biggest explosion to happen. Incidentally, Eccles is the second biggest explosion to occur in the state. Monongah was number 1, Eccles number 2, Benwood was 3, and Leyland 4 in the casualties of a state mine explosion. Now in the other class, Mr. Blankenship, I didn't mention Benwood. You say you like for them to be imbued in their mind the terrificness of the explosion. Benwood is in Marshall County, but not far from Wheeling. Shaft mine, not very deep, on across the hill. They have entrance by drift mouth, but the actual portal is a shaft mine. That's the same case over at Aminata and at Bishop at that same case. At Benwood, exactly 10 years to the day from the Eccles explosion, 1924, April 28th, Benwood blew up one morning and killed every living soul in it, 119 men. When the rescue men went into that mine, they found this. They found steel rails ripped up from the track, rolled up into coils and blown down the entries. They found big mine posts as much as 10 inches in diameter that had been blown down, and some of them torn into toothpick fashion. The walls of some sides of the coal had been blown out. Big boulders fell out, and the boulders went blowing down the entries and the haulage ways. And it took several days to get past all that terrible devastation inside that mine to get to the bodies. And the bodies had to be, couldn't get a car in, couldn't get a motor in, couldn't get a mule in to bring them out. They had to carry them stretcher fashion, and some of them were as far as 2 miles back on the ground. 4 men to stretcher. Terrific job there, you can imagine. Getting over the top of the fallen slate. Now I'm going to come to Glenn Rogers. Glenn Rogers, Mr. Blankenship told a little story of Glenn Rogers. Now that's over in the adjoining county. 26 miles from the outskirts of Beckley is Glenn Rogers. One time a very, very important mine in the state of West Virginia, and one of the deepest shaft mines in the state. At that time it was. 680 feet from the ground level to the coal level, 720 feet to the bottom of the sump. Glenn Rogers, when it went in, and first cut from the main shaft to the air shaft, 200 yards, had an explosion. Showed you how hot that was. Cutting one entry through. I mean, one driving from this shaft to this shaft. Burnt those men something terrible. I remember one of those men. Ears burnt off. He lived. None of them were killed. His hands grew together, his fingers all grew together because of skin, burnt. Nose was practically gone. Man by the name of Duncan. And I knew another one of them. That his face was so badly scarred from the burn just when they went in. Now, Glenn Rogers was then tagged. Boy, she's going to be a hot one. And hot it was. It's in the Beckley scene. Same as Eccles. On November the 6th, 1923, a cold, drizzly, rainy morning. That may be the reason I didn't go to school that morning, Mr. Blankenship. I didn't want to get in that weather. I rode a horseback to school, incidentally, to Milam High School. And I have to say, my daddy did furnish me a good horse. I didn't have to ride a mule. Anyway, that morning, I don't know why I didn't go to school. I don't recall why it was. But anyway, the news came. We lived about a mile from the shaft on our own property, not in the coal camp. News came, Glenroy's blew up. Well, I took up the railroad tracks and got up there, and all this, of course, quite an excitement. If you've ever witnessed something like that, you've witnessed an unusual scene. First thing, of course, they did was take bradish cloth and put up a barricade. You weren't allowed behind the barricade. Well, of course, the first thing a person wants to do is stick his nose in there. Well, the barricade, the bradish cloth was put up a distance closer than near the wall there of the shaft mouth. I stuck my head in and got shoved back right quick, and I wanted to see what was going on, and kept standing around, drizzling, rain falling. And finally, a man came through like you open a curtain, you know, came through, and he said, "Hey, boy," he said, "Lord have mercy, have you got a cigarette?" He said, "That air down there is terrible. A man's got to smoke when he gets out there." Well, I was a rickety boy then, about 17 years old, and learned to smoke, and I reached in my pocket. Incidentally, I don't smoke now, I quit. Pulled out a pack of Chesterfield. Another man came through, those cigarettes went just like that. And I got a brainstorm up. I turned and I went to the company store, which wasn't just across the creek, and around across another little bridge. I ran to the company store, and I went in as if I had all the authority in the world, and I walked up to the counter. I said, "I've been designated to pass out cigarettes for the rescue men over to mine. Hand me 2 or 3 cartons of Camels and Chesterfield and Lucky Strikes." I didn't make any other kind in those days. I stuck them up in my arm, and I went back, and I got to the canvas there, and I pulled the canvas back. I said, "I've been asked to pass out cigarettes to rescue men. Come on in." I walked on inside the canvas. I did the job. I didn't slack on it. Of course, I pocketed a package or 2 of them while I was at it from the trouble. I think I did. I don't even recall that part. But I passed the cigarettes out diligently to the men when they came up. And I stood there. One thing I did notice, and I made note of it in the book. Special train came in from Princeton with doctors and nurses. They got above, up above the shaft where you look over to where we were all standing, and they stationed those nurses. I stood there and I thought, well, what a pretty bunch of women they were. They had on those blue capes. I believe I wrote in the book that the pretty nurses in the blue capes stood there in the drizzling rain, watching to see if any man came up that could be so good to give them help. But no man came up there that needed help. Everyone that came up was dead, and I mean dead. And the first time I remember when I heard somebody say, they're going to bring a body up. I don't know how they got it unless the telephone up. Bringing up a body, and you could see that cable coming up, how that dark and dreary hole. That cable came up, it traveled. I mean, those skiffs, rather, not skiffs. They come out of a mine. They come out fast. They don't dally. They came up and they were very near stop right now. Then they stopped. 4 men holding the stretcher. Body was covered with a piece of bradish cloth or canvas. Couldn't see anything except that inert piece of clay there. And out they went and threw the canvas and took them to the lamp house and laid them out. 24 of those men were brought out and laid out, 12 in one row and 12 in the other row, feet to head, and then you were allowed to go through and view the bodies. 3 of those men were blown to bits. Their bodies were never viewed. My brother was a rescue man in that crew, and he told about the bodies that were brought, that were picked up, that were not recognizable. One of those men was an old man, a Mr. Doyle. His hair was gray, very crisp, short, stiff, gray hair, cut short on his head. They found his head. They knew that was Mr. Doyle. Francis Harrington, brother to my wife's brother-in-law, if that means anything, was an athlete, big, husky-armed football player, fine-looking young gentleman. I remembered him, kind of admired him, you know. Looked like a college athlete. They found an arm and a leg. They knew by those biceps and these muscles that must be Bill. So they named him Bill Harrington. Then they eliminated Joe Gerrock was the man that they said, well, we got parts of two of the other, we'll call Joe. And then fixed them up in 3 different baskets. And they were prepared for burial. Francis was sent back to Michigan. Bill Harrington was, Francis' brother. Mr. Doyle was sent back to Illinois, from whence he came. Joe Gerrock was buried in the Catholic cemetery over at Beckley. I took a picture. I made a cross with the permission of the Catholic rector over there, the Catholic father, who showed me where to find the grave from an old book he had, looked like a register. And I put a cross up and took a picture of Joe Gerrock's grave. Joe Gerrock was an Austrian. News all said he was a Pole, but I got from the record in the Catholic rectory he was an Austrian. And he had a wife who had been in this country about 6 weeks. 5 little children. She was told when she ran up to the mine, she wanted to know, which place is Joe? She said, Joe's all right. Joe's down there, he's helping. Had a lot of bad luck down there. Joe's helping them clear everything. They lied to her, naturally. She came back after a while, they lied to her again. One humorous incident, I can't tell, happened there, one when they lied to her. A retort she made. Then she took them at their word. They were officials. She went on back home. She lived about a quarter of a mile down in the Shaney. The day went on by, and finally everything was cleared, and the bodies were brought out. Supper time came around. She came up that track, little dinky track, one of those long-handled aluminum dinner buckets. 5 little orphan children trailing behind her came up with Joe's dinner. Pathé Newsreel got a picture of that. I'd like to see that picture now. And the poor thing thought that Joe was still working and helping need his supper. I had some women, one woman wrote me that she cried when she read that story. I went further into that. Maybe I'm getting off from actual mining. I went further in to try to trace down where those children were. I accidentally found out just a while back that Mrs. Gerrock married a man over at Stanford, and she's dead now. And all those children are dead but one, and she's a girl living over at Callaway Heights. Someday I'm going to call her up and tell her, ask her about the story and this and that, if she even remembers that far back. That's the Glenn Rogers explosion, and as I made the statement to one of the fellows asked at the other meeting, the Federal Bureau of Mines told a story that when Glenn Rogers blew up, one man was blown into the sump and they fished his body out. Well, that's incorrect. That was a Mr. Young was blown into the sump at Eccles in the explosion of Eccles in 1926. Eccles' second explosion, a man by the name of Young. Was at Glenn Rogers. There was the old Joyce section that blew up, and the entrance to that section was 1/2 mile from the shaft bottom. And my brother told me this. He said the slate fell in where the impact of that explosion was the worst. That's right at the point of entrance to where the explosion began. He said the slate fell out to the huckleberry roots. And that coal seam was 500 feet underground with that mountain there, probably over 1,000. But that's just the exaggeration of the miners use when slate falls in after the explosion. He said they just had to carry bodies over a mountain of slate. Now, I might have dwelled too long on that. Let me run to the next one now. I'm going into the ones that had the terrific blast. Down at Paint Creek, on Paint Creek, there was an explosion went off in 1906, about January the 19th, 1906, at a place called Detroit Mine. It belonged to the Detroit Mining Company. It was caused by the fact that that mining company didn't set the fan up. They'd put the fan, and state mine inspector come around and say, why isn't the fan running? Well, we got it sitting here now. We're going to hook it up, right? Just getting ready. Well, he said, I want it hooked up when I get back. Maybe another mine inspector would come back the next trip, or this one would come back. And this one came back. Well, where's your fan? Well, we had to move it. We got another place we wanted to set it up. Well, they never did set that fan up. And the mountain, the drift was on the side of the mountain. So that day in January, back in 1906, it blew up at exactly noontime. Some of the men were able to come outside and eat their lunch. And they would just walk, and some of the men had come out, and that saved the lives of several men. They'd walked out to eat, and the mine went off while they were out there. But the ones inside perished. The dust explosion entirely. By the way, it's been said, you can take that for what it's worth, I don't know the actual facts of that, but it is said that the dust explosion is more terrific than the methane gas. That when it actually gets suspended in a, what they call colloidal suspension, isn't that the chemistry for it? It gets in colloidal suspension in the air. No, it's not a colloidal, but it's suspended.
Dust cloud.
Dust cloud, and then it goes off. That it has more power than any other type of explosion. And out, when it blew at Detroit mine, there was a pony and a small mule inside the mine, some distance. It blew those two animals out of that mine and over into the valley like a trajectory, and they struck in the valley, and they were so pulverized that you couldn't tell the two animals' species except by examining their hoofs. One was a pony and one was a mule, small mule. Now that's the terrific force that dust explosion had. One of the things there that was pitiful, a man by the name of McLaughlin had his son, 12-year-old boy with him. See that, of course, in the days before child labor. And the black dame crept into the rooms where he was working with the boy. He knew the mine blew up. He was found dead, he and the boy was found dead. He was found dead holding that boy as close to him as he could hold him, gripped to him as if to ward off death or any of its consequences. And in that same mine and in the same shape were two McArdle boys. And they were also found holding each other tightly. They died together. They wanted it that way. They knew it was coming. To start out with, I'm going to tell you a little human interest story. I especially want to look at the two ladies right when I tell this one. They always react differently from the men. I'm explaining to you if you might look them in the face as you see what they think of this story. This actually happened over at Eccles in the big explosion, 1914. That morning, that fateful day, this pretty young thing sent her husband to the mines. As young people do, she kissed him goodbye, and he went on his way. He went into that mine, down into number 5, 2:30 that afternoon, that terrible rumble and blast went off, and that young man went to eternity. The shaft was torn up so badly that a cage couldn't get down immediately, and there had to be considerable work done to get to the shaft bottom. And the first day passed, and the second and the third and the fourth day passed, and nearly 5 days until that could be rigged up, sports and so forth, to send that cage down. Incidentally, Governor Hatfield of West Virginia was on that first cage that went down. And it couldn't quite reach the bottom, and they had to crawl off the cage and land down on the floor of the mine among all that stink of dead mules and so forth. And then the rescue crews went in and started searching for the bodies. Well, this young man was not found on the 5th day. He was not found on the 6th day, nor the 7th day. Ladies, on the 8th day, that pretty young thing got married again. On the 12th day, they found his body beginning to putrefy. Brought it out of the mine, fixed it up in the machine shop, had 2 mortuaries from Beckley there, put him in a casket, took him to the cemetery. She and her new husband went to the cemetery with his body, of course. The ceremony was enacted at the cemetery. He stood on one side of the grave, and she stood on the other side of the grave until his body was laid to rest. I would not name that lady, but I actually had not too long ago, I had a lady to approach me over at the mall here in Beckley and tell me that she knew the woman now that she was dead. I wouldn't name her, didn't name any of them, not to happen to any embarrassment. Solomon Eccles going to bring up one point. It's the only explosion, Big Eccles, was the only explosion to ever occur in West Virginia and possibly the nation that a man other than a coal miner was killed inside that explosion. That morning, it being payday, permission was given to an insurance salesman to go inside that mine and sell insurance. And when the mine first, as I told you about, out blew to the face of the coal and made that rumble, he was talking to some man and they knew what had happened. They started running for the shaft bottom, and they weren't too far away from the shaft bottom. And their bodies were found near the shaft bottom, and he had several applications in his coat pocket. He lived in Ohio Street in Charleston, West Virginia. His body was shipped back to Colorado, to his native state, and buried there. That's the only man. Now, the Federal Bureau of Mines stated that man was killed at Monongah. He was not killed at Monongah. Now, move on to the one explosion. I believe we'll go to Monongah next. Monongah, if you're not familiar with it, is in Marion County, a few miles south of Fairmont, and it's on the West Fork River above Fairmont. You'd think it'd be below since it's at south, but the river flows north there. In junctions the Tigris to form the Monongahela at Fairmont. Monongah was in those days a mine in the shape of a giant U. Now this is a giant U here. Here is mine number 8. Here is mine number 6. They joined together. They belonged to the Fairmont Coal Company, a subsidiary of the Consolidation Coal Company. And they had opened up many entries and rooms back under the mountain. The mine worked an enormous lot of men. In that days there was not very much machinery, but the mine did have a motor. Possibly more than one, but one motor was known because sometimes it's accused of being part of the cause of the explosion. The mine hadn't been working for a few days, and it's nearing Christmas time, being in December the 6th, 1907. All the men went back to work, and there was 2 incidents there. I didn't tell the other place, I won't tell. The hand of fate pulls a peculiar thing on people. Why did this man go in that mine and die with the others, and this man did not go in? One man that morning got up, started to work. His wife must have eaten a mess of fresh pork or something because she was deathly sick. She was so sick at the stomach that she just said, "Honey, I can't let you go to the work. I'm afraid I'm going to die." Between vomiting, she said that. She was so sick. He said, "All right, I won't go this morning." Every man that did go in that mine died. The hand of fate. I talked to a man there a few years ago by the name of Trader. He was quite a character. I said, "Mr. Trader, were you here when the mine blew?" "Oh, yeah, I worked in the mine." He said, "I hope I can tell this so you get the levity of it." He said, "Yeah, my brother and I worked in that mine, worked every day." He said, "You know, the day before that explosion," said, "I came out of that mine, fooling around out here. I stepped on a board with a nail in and stuck that nail in my foot. Said my foot was sore, and said my poor brother went in that mine the next morning and said, 'Don't you know he got killed?'" As if that was some joke on his brother, that he went in that mine and got killed. Now, Monongah blew in the afternoon. As I told the other class, the motor came out of the mine, number 8 mine. The mine floor was level at about a half mile from the mine entrance. That mine floor was level. And then it rose, the track rose to the exterior of the entrance to the mine. Then it crossed the interurban track, went over a ramp over West Fork River to the dumping or the tipple. This motor came out of there hauling 10 cars of coal. It came to the outside and started up over the ramp, and just as it reached the apex of that ramp, about 5 of those cars broke loose. And then they started their descent back into the mine. They rolled at 1/2 mile, and when they hit the level of the mine floor, they wrecked. And when they wrecked, at that exact instant, that terrific mine explosion went off. The largest, the biggest mine explosion to ever occur in the world to that date. Been bigger ones since. But it is still the biggest to ever occur in all the Americas. And the number of men killed is to this day not known. In this book, I have the names of 457 men killed. Before this book was written, 361 men were named as the men killed, and that was supposedly the official count. I told the other group how that happened, that I got those names. The West Virginia legislature in 1909 appointed a committee to investigate the reasons for so many mine explosions occurring along about 1906, 7, 8, and 9 to see if anything could be done about it. This committee went to Monongah to the Fairmont Coal Company and asked certain questions. Many of them was similarly irrelevant questions. How much did you sell beans a pound, and so on and so on. And the Fairmont Coal Company gave the committee a list of the men killed in number 6 mine, but didn't give them a list of men killed in number 8 mine. Now, at the time of the explosion, a committee, benevolent committee, relief committee, had been formed to get money to help out the indigent left, the widows and the orphans left as a result, since no compensation was evident in those days. And that committee got the names of 359 men whose families needed succor, relief, and the names of the engineer killed at the mouth of the mine and the trapper boy supposedly killed on the bridge as the blowout came. Now that blowout there is that picture there. You're not close enough to see it, but it shows what devastation. It came out from under the earth there and blew out of the number 6 mine, this one. Now number 8 didn't do that devastation, but it was killed everybody in it anyway. Now, I took the names given by the committee to the committee on the men that worked in number 6 and the names of the men listed in the relief committee and intercrossed till I found who was there and who to eliminate, and I came up with 457 names in this book, and I don't know what went with the names in number 8 mine. Therefore, there's quite an opinion that as many as 500 men or more died in that explosion. There's no way of ever finding it out. The coal company claimed whenever they got up to around maybe less than 300. Now we got them all, and they kept on, they kept on. They found bodies from December the 6th until sometime in February. Now sometimes mines like that get so stinky that it's very near impossible to go further into some of the working. The rescue men will maybe renege a little, and the coal company might be glad of it. That happened at Old Jet in 1912, McDowell County. They got so stinking, the man asked the coal company to let them quit hunting, and they did. So it's supposed to be 8-3. Fish count there was 8-1. Now, in the Monongah explosion, it split the ground up in town. There's places there that cracks came in the ground. Some buildings fell down. All the window lights were broken. And some stated that some window lights cracked in Fairmont several miles away. So that gives you an idea, a little, of what a terrific explosion it was. And as I said, I have thought, even laid in bed thinking, trying to imagine just how terrific that was. That's just beyond your imagination. Such a thing as that could happen. The old Raleigh Herald came out and said 600 men died there. The Catholic magazine recently from Pittsburgh stated that over 600 men had died in Monongah when it blew up. And the mine foreman said, who happened to be lucky enough to be on the outside of the mine when it blew, said, my God, there were over 600 men that night. To this day, the biggest count thus far that's ever been issued is the account in this book. And I felt that I might be taken to task for that. And immediately when the book came off the press, the Consolidation Coal Company from Pittsburgh sent me a letter for 2 copies in Bellinport, and I sent them the copy, and I thought, now, if there's going to be any explanation as to the reason I gave the names of 457 men, I'll hear from them. I haven't yet. And any number of other of their offices sent for the book also. Nobody's ever contested that figure. In fact, that figure is bona fide in such a manner as I don't see how they can contest it, and I'm sure they never will. One little point there again, the Monongah explosion, it is entire volume could be written on. The person wanted to research further on it. This old man trader told me a little bit of a story. He said the money began to pour in from cities like New York, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, and Chicago. So when that story got out, that terrible explosion in Monongah, the money did pour in. There was a bountiful lot of money came to that relief society. And this fellow, he was a humorous character. He's dead now, the Mr. Trader was. He said, boy, he said, when they came in, that money was brought in by a lot of these fellows from those cities, brought it in and piled. He said, don't you know something funny happened there? He said, them darn men married these widows. Every one of them stayed here. He said, boy, I want to tell you, there was a passel of good-looking widows left here when that mine blew up. All the relief committee came in and married them up. Back in 1944, April 24th, between Fairmont and Clarksburg, a mine called the Catherine Mine at Lumberport blew up on a Saturday morning. In my opinion, that is one of the most terrific explosions that I got. For small, it wasn't about 17 men inside the mine. These men were, they were not full complement of workmen in the mine. These men were running a coal cutting machine, and lunchtime came. They went to a place where they met to eat their lunches. They always call them dinner at the mine, don't they? And while they were eating there, one of them went back, and one of the machines had caught fire from electric. Something caught the cables fire, the rubber or plastic or whatever shielded the wires. It caught a fire and was smoking. It wasn't flaming, but it was smoking. He went back and got the men, and they went up to fight the fire, and they got more dense, and the smoke was terrible. The inhalation would have been dangerous. So one of them went out to the outside. The mine foreman went to the outside, and he got the superintendent and told him, you've got to get some firefighting equipment in here, or get in there and stop that fire. Well, the superintendent started in the mine with him. Hand of fate again. That superintendent got about 300 or 400 yards, and he said, I'll tell you what I believe I'll do. I believe I'll go back and get some men and get some firefighting equipment. Get in there, put that fire out. Well, he went back and he was rounding up that equipment, and the Catherine mine at Lumberport blew up. And when it blew up, it blew up. It blew everything in that mine. It just turned it inside out, practically speaking. And it blew, of course, from that machine fire there. It blew material out of that mine across a highway out to another mine tipple. One man was carrying a sack of tools on his back and what we call a tow sack. He was a half a mile in the mine. That tow sack was found a half a mile out of the mine with all the tools in it. And his body was smashed nearly to ribbons against the river coal. The flame also, and debris came out of the mine, and back in 44, people drove their cars to the working place, and a lot of the parked cars were destroyed on the outside of the mine. And my reading and research on that, for a small explosion, that one was beyond words. To think how terrific that went off. A little bit more than blowing the top off the hill. And that would have been a gigantic stroke. Now, Mr. Blankenship, I'm going to conclude with the Farmington explosion. 1968, where 78 men died. Explosion, at the time this book was completed, I made the statement that there are 21 bodies to date remaining in that mine, and that was in the last year. To the best of my knowledge and from information received, one body has been retrieved. Therefore, that leaves 20, or would you say, skeletons still inside the Farmington mine. Now, I asked this question there, why they weren't getting those men out any faster than that, those bodies. And I was informed that the coal company is not allowed to mine coal other than house coal. Therefore, just a small crew of men are inside the mine, mining toward where those bodies supposedly are, and I'm sure they know about where they are. One other thing that was I thought was of a little interest was whenever the president of the Consolidated Coal Company, or vice president, Corcoran, Mr. Corcoran, or Corcoran, I don't know how he pronounces that name exactly, met with...
Corcoran.
Corcoran?
Corcoran.
Corcoran. He met in the little Methodist church near the big complex there and announced to the people that he would have to seal that mine. I got there one day in the spring, and I had a Polaroid camera, and it started snowing on me, and I took a half a dozen pictures, and I got a picture of the little church. Quaint little beautiful church sitting in the valley, not too far from one of their offices there. I was proud of the fact that I got that picture, and of course it shows a certain reverence there. Now another thing about the explosion was that there was a gallant effort on the part of the rescue men, and I'll have to say the company too, to go in to see if there was any living bodies in the mine, any living men left after the explosion. I think all hope was gone shortly after the explosion, but men did. Like Mr. Ashcraft said, they went in that mine when that was, practically speaking, a death trap. But one thing I'd like to say right here, gentlemen and ladies, the rescue men, the rescue crews in the mining areas of West Virginia and presumably other states, but I'll say especially West Virginia, are to me the most laudable, should be complimented more. They're the bravest men I've ever read about. To think that men would enter a mine like Farmington with explosion after small explosion going off and the terrificness with which that blast went off, to blow the cap off of one of those shafts like it did. And then men risked their lives to go in and see if other men were living. Surely men, rescue men, are their brother's keeper when they can do that. Now, in many cases, men have entered mines that it was looked to be certain death traps, like those men at Red Ash Rush Run that went in and a 12-year-old boy in that group, attempting to see if they could find live men there. And they died in that Holocaust. That about concludes what I'd have to say about farming. Other than this, I think was a compliment to me. After the book came out, the Pikeville College wrote to the publishers and asked them for permission to print the chapter in full, verbatim, on Farmington. And the printing publishers got in touch with me and informed the college that they didn't have full jurisdiction to do that, that would be for me to concede. And I wrote the Pikeville College that I gave them free permission, no money, nothing. They could go ahead and print that if I thought it'd be any benefit to the mining industry and to mankind. They could have that chapter free of charge. Now, is there anything else you'd like to mention? Would you like to mention that fact that happened down at, one of the gentlemen mentioned something to me a while ago, that happened in the Detroit mine on Paint Creek in January 1906. I believe about January 19th that occurred. That has two facets to it that should be of interest to this, and one of them was that coal company did not keep the fan running. In fact, they had no fan at all. It was a drift mouth mine. It presumably had no gas, but who can guarantee that there isn't methane gas in any mine above creek level or below creek level? Anyway, it was a well-known fact that they would, every time the mine inspector came, the officials would say, "Oh, we got this right here ready to install this fan." But the inspectors did not close the mine down. And then when he came back, he found the fan somewhere else. And he said, "Well, we're just getting ready to install it here. This is a more feasible place for the fan." And the mine went on working. And that day about noon, on January the 19th, that mine blew up. It was a dust explosion that blew up. And it was terrific enough that it blew a mule, well, a pony and a small mule, out of the mouth of the mine, straight across the valley. Well, the trajectory was over into the valley. And when those two animals were picked up, you couldn't tell the mule from the pony except by hoofs. Formation of the hoof was all. That's how pulverized they were from that explosion. Two pitiful things went off in that mine there. I've been written about that. Women have written me, men haven't written me. Women have written me telling me what shook them up, made them weep. And one of them was that a Mr. McLaughlin had his young son with him in that mine. And he knew the mine had exploded, but it didn't. He was in a room, and he knew that the black man would soon get him. And he and his boy were found dead in the room. He had that boy clasped to his bosom, holding him, just trying to guard off death. Now, and in that same mine, two brothers were found holding each other close together and died. That I thought was a pitiful story. And I've had the women to write me. I've had some funny stories, too, to come out. One woman in Kansas City said, "It's the most horrible book I ever read." She said, "I don't mean you did a horrible job or written horrible," but she said, "I never knew that men worked under circumstances and died as horribly as happened until I read your book." Of course, in Kansas City, there's no coal mining nearby. I had one little old lady, the little old lady story, Mr. Blankenship, from over at Fayetteville wrote me this letter. She said, "Dear Mr. Dillon, somebody carried my book off. Will you please send me another one and I'll pay you when I get my check?" Said, "I'm disappointed in your book, though." Said, "You didn't have my husband's name in that book." And said, "He worked 50 years in the mines, but he never got killed." Forthcoming book. I was at the coal camp of Aminati. It lies over on the Virginia-West Virginia line, and the mine, some of it's under Virginia, some of it's under West Virginia, but it's under the auspices of the West Virginia Department of Mine. I told some of these fellows that outside there. I talked to the former mine foreman there at the time of the explosion, which killed 11 men back in '57, and talked about how it all happened and this and that. And I said, Mr. Evans, I'm pretty sure his name was Evans, do you think this can happen again? He said, boy, you damn right it can happen again. Now, I was of the opinion that with this very setup you have here, is the thing that to prevent these future mine explosions, and I'm going to read you a little excerpt from my preface in this book. And as I said, I got taken to task for it. I was a little bit rebuffed on that one. The preface reads, since controls over coal mining have become strict and experience has taught the industry how to avoid gross mine tragedies, the chances for such past holocausts are hoped to be history. The purpose of this book is to narrate the accounts, scenes, and the events of the worst of these explosions that occurred in the state of West Virginia, who suffered most from such accidents. A little magazine called the Work and People of Appalachia printed a whole page on this book and me, and they said I surely went wrong in that statement because of the Scotia mine disaster at Oven Fork had happened. And I do reiterate the statement that I do not believe, and I hope to God I'm right, and I'm sure you do too, that there'll ever be another explosion like Leyland, Eccles, Monongah. Now, they happened in India, and I don't think we'll ever have them in America again. We're doing too good a job. If you want to, I'll conclude now at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your kind attention. I hope I haven't bored you too much, and I hope you all have good luck in the world and the best job in the world in the mining industry. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you for a fine presentation, and I apologize to the audience for such a long introduction. Thank you again.